Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this forum, and thanks especially to the organizer, the Korean Herald, for bringing such great people, speakers, thinkers, professionals to debate about issues that have to do with design, which means issues that have to do with essentially everybody's life. Design, we like it or not, like architecture, like the weather, surrounds us wherever we do, wherever we go. I will try to say something about design and art, because first of all, I know very little about design. Essentially, I know nothing about design except that I suffer it. But I know something about art, because I've been involved with it in my mature age for the past 30 years, which is a bit frightening, but that's the reality. And I know something also about art institutions, namely museums. Is design part of the fine arts? If we were in the West, I would say no. In somewhere, I don't know exactly when, but the Western culture pushed design away from the fine arts, or it never admitted design in the fine arts. And it started probably with the Greeks when they decided that making things was not an art. Making things was just making things. And only poets, or mostly poets, deserve to be named artists, but painters or sculptors were not artists, they were doing things. Maybe they were designers at the time. So when I came to work in this beautiful country, I found that in the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art, we had a department that it was named Craft. And to be honest, I did not understand in the beginning what craft was. The things that were named craft looked like either sculpture or design. So I asked, what is craft? And I didn't get the right answer immediately. I got it later. I understood that craft was floating between art and design until someone explained that an object that is considered craft is a unique object that is supposed to have a function. And again, in the Western mentality, we were trained that design is produced industrially. The Bauhaus was the great invention of modernity in terms of making design an art. And this is again the problem that I'm trying to find out, and one day we will find out. But the truth is that not only the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art of Korea, many other museums in the world have a design department. MoMA has a design department. The Pompidou Center has the Centre de Création Industrielle. In Holland, the Boijmans Museum has a great design department. The Stedelijk Museum has a design department, and so on. So here we are. We are in a place where design plays a role within the institutions that deal with the fine arts. Whether it is a fine art or not, maybe at the end of the day, doesn't matter. It plays a role. We have it. the next thing that I found out as well is, long time ago, is that, and it's not my idea, I'd read it somewhere, so someone thought about it before, is that design usurpated the monopoly of the production of beauty that art used to have. Or maybe it didn't, but we are taught that art is an expression, a human expression that produces, makes, and deals with beauty. Now, somewhere also in the evolution of mankind, design broke that monopoly, if there was ever a monopoly. And today, everything we see around us, this building, the clothes you wear, the shoes that protect your feet, the cars you drive, if you drive a car, are tending to beauty. We could have a discussion whether architecture also tends to beauty. Many cities are so ugly, but that's another discussion. For the ideas that we have to deal with today, I would like to show some examples of the way in which design and art collide, design and art fight, design and art talk to each other, design and art help each other, and design and art love and hate each other. And I know that yesterday you had great speakers also talking about issues that could be considered similar. After me, I think there is a fabulous artist that is going to talk, Che Zhonghua. He has a great show going on at the moment at the National Museum here in Seoul, and I recommend every one of you not to miss it. And he will probably say much more interesting things than what I can say now. But I'll give it a try, and I would like to start with some considerations about the institution that I have the honor and the privilege of serving at the moment, the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art. And I start with some facts, some very basic facts like how many people we are, the money we spend, and the facilities we manage. It says we have 300 employees. In fact, we are nearly 900, all in all, but these are the official. And we are located in several places around Seoul. Sometimes when I have to explain, and now is the case, when I have to explain the facilities we manage, I have the feeling I'm a little bit like a real estate developer. But the museum manages 3 different buildings for exhibition purposes and 2 artist-in-residence program, and it's managing also the construction of an open storage, as I will try to explain briefly. I really think this timer that I have in front of me is a great invention, so I can module my ideas and not make you waste time with irrelevant information. This is not irrelevant, although it's very factual. MMCA was created in 1969, and it is one of the pioneering institutions of its kind in Asia. It's even older than many institutions in Europe or in the United States. And if you look at this, you see that it's one of the biggest institutions in the world. This is the 덕수궁관과. Well, this is the 덕수궁 Palace. And in the 덕수궁 Palace, a beautiful document of Korean modern period. The last king of Korea, who declared the Korean Empire a bit more than 100 years ago, established his residency. He commissioned a British architect to build his modern residency, which is this building over here. And he was, I mean, I think he had a bit of bad luck because his project of modernizing Korea was interrupted by the invasion of the Japanese in 1910, which is the year this building was completed. So he lived in his house, but as a prisoner. In 1938, the Japanese government decided to make a museum of modern art. This building is next to it. You see it right on the left of the residency of the emperor. And at this moment, I also recommend a visit to this place. It's one of the most beautiful places in Seoul. And the exhibition that is shown at the moment in the 덕수궁 Palace is about the building and about the beginning of the collections of modern art in Korea. Fascinating story. I can't tell you right now. It's another lecture. It's another symposium. But I recommend it. Please, if you have time, don't miss this exhibition. So, 덕수궁 is the Museum of Modern Art. This is Gwacheon. This building was opened to the public in 1986. Very important period, very important moment of the modern or the contemporary history of Korea. Korea changes dramatically in the late 80s in many reasons, and that is another lecture and another lecturer because I'm not a specialist in that history, but in 1986, Seoul hosts the Asian Games, and in 1988, the Olympic Games, and Korea becomes a democracy in that moment. This building, as you have seen before, is big, and it's located in the Seoul Grand Park, surrounded by a number of facilities and things that are very interesting. There is a zoo here. There is an amusement park over there. There are campings. There is a rose garden, a lake, mountains, forest. So the museum is also surrounded by, this is a bit of an aerial view, and the museum is surrounded by a sculpture garden. When I first saw it, I thought, this looks a bit anachronistic. But at the same time, I produced another idea, which is, let's make it really contemporary. And we're still trying. But the museum in this building in Gwacheon has been for a long time the museum. In late 2013, this museum opened, and this is very close by. This is next to the Gyeongbokgung Palace. Gyeongbokgung is this area here, and Gyeongbokgung is the big palace of Seoul. The building that you see in front of the street is a 1928 building that was conceived as a military hospital. And the compound of the museum, the area of the museum, used to be, after the Korean War, a prison managed by the secret services. So it's a nasty place. It was not a nice place before. But I have the theory, then when the military go out somewhere, in Korea, we make a museum. And that's nice. So this is also a very good example, one of the very few buildings of rationalist aesthetics in Korea. And in my opinion, one of the best museum buildings in the world. I really celebrate that. So these are the, and this is Cheongju. This is the future. It's supposed to open at the end of the year. Only one of the wings, it's going to be an open storage with exhibition facilities and so on. So this is the museum. Now let's see what the museum does. What does the museum have to do with design? The beginning of the relationship of the museum with design is architecture. And my first paid job was in a museum of architecture in Brussels, 1989. I began to work with a bunch of freaks that believed that traditional European architecture was the solution to the mess created by modernity. And I really learned an awful lot of things with this bunch of fabulous freaks. And I feel very honored that I didn't read it in a book, but I lived it. MMCA, the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art, also has a strong relationship with architecture and design. I'll try to explain. And this is an example of some exhibitions that we have produced recently about architecture. Papers and Concrete was shown recently here. It looked at the history of the ideas that animated the production of architecture between 1987 and 1997. Why 87 and 97? Chronologies are different depending on where you are. If you are in Europe, or if you are in Spain, 1936 is very important. 1936 may not mean anything in other places, but in Spain it's very important. It's the beginning of the Civil War. 1987 is the moment where the Korea begins or feels the beginning of its life as a democratic country. And 1997 is a moment of crisis. We didn't know. Essentially, as a European, I didn't know anything about Asia before coming here. Now I know a little tiny bit. But 1997 is the moment of a big financial crisis. And but between this, in this decade, the ideas behind architecture, the pedagogical structure, the laws changed. And it explains what happened in this decade, explains how we live today here. Because this is the moment where architects were trained and laws were made. So one of the things that I think MMCA is the best museum in the world for, and there are many reasons I believe that, but one of them is that the exhibition design is great. And again, don't miss the exhibitions we have at the moment. This is an exhibition we have right now going on in Gwacheon. It's people in Seoul think Gwacheon is far away. It's just 45 minutes. This is nothing. My assistant spends 2 hours every morning to come to work. It takes 2 hours for her to go from home to the office. So 45 minutes is nothing. Kim Jong-up is, I could say, one of the modern architect. He worked with Le Corbusier shortly after the Korean War, and he's the author of the design of many relevant buildings in Korea, not only in Seoul. This exhibition we opened it very recently, and I really discovered a great architect that, even if trained by the one or the master of modern architecture, he developed a language that goes away from the 90 degrees angle. Andrei Nakov is a Russian art historian who many years ago told me that there is a need to write a book on art history about the fight between the 90 degrees angle, what we call the square angle, and the curve. And that's true. And that is the early 20th century. This is the fight between Art Nouveau and Art Deco. And Kim Jong-un had nothing to do with Art Nouveau and had nothing to do with Art Deco, but he is an expression of that same fight. This is another example of what we did with architecture dash design. And I think I have to speed up. I have 19 minutes left. The Young Architects Program is a public commission that the museum did from its beginning. The museum did in its sole venue, and it lasted until last year. Essentially, we lost the sponsor. That's the reality of museums also today. But we were able to work together with some very interesting young Korean architects. And I'm just showing you some images. I can't describe. These I saw by myself. The first time that I came to MMCA Seoul, I enjoyed this project. This was under my directorship. It's a project that nearly killed us, but happily it didn't. And it's one of the, in my opinion, interesting projects that brought architecture to deal with the issue of sustainability. And this is also about sustainability. This is the last one. It's great. It's a great toy. It's a toy. It is an umbrella or a group of umbrellas supposed to create shadow and supposed to create shadow for the very hot and humid summer of Seoul. I wanted to buy this for the collection. I hope I can still do it. Craft, as I mentioned before, is also part of the museum, and it has been expressed in a number of exhibitions and also in the collection. So, again, does craft have something to do with design? I don't think so. For me, design has to do with industry. This is handmade. The problem of craft, in my opinion, is that it is still associated with the luxury industry, and it should not. I think in the era of robotization and of super sophisticated technological production, doing things by hand is relevant, but it should not be a luxury item. We should all do things by hand. We should all be creative people. And craft expresses within the museum in very classical terms, very classical and very compartmented criteria and genres. So, in my opinion, we have a great opportunity in bringing the issue of craft and hand-making and useful products into the 21st century and into everybody's lives, not only into the life of a few. Jewelry was also part of the program of the museum and the collection as well. So this is the closest we got to something that could be designed But also under my directorship, we began to engage with some more complicated issues. The Superhumanity Symposium that took place last year was an example of the way in which museums not only are places to enjoy, experience, and meet, but are places that think. And I belong to a generation that believes that museums also have to think. Museums are not safe boxes that contain and preserve and keep expensive objects. Museums are an essential part of the intelligence of a city, of a country, of a community. And sometimes we try to do that with this kind of events. The Superhumanity Symposium debated the future of design in the museum in something that was like a congress of science fiction. And everything of the symposium is on YouTube. So please Google it or YouTube it, and great lectures, super interesting. Every single lecture was like incredible experience. And the outcome of it was that, there was no concluding outcome, but there was a very clear conclusion is that we need to keep talking, we need to keep thinking, we need to keep debating, and we need to keep criticizing everything that surrounds us and the way we live. The thesis of this symposium obeys to the ideas of Mark Wigley and Beatriz Colomina, who curated the Istanbul Design Biennial 2 years or 3 years ago. And the main idea, if I can say it in a few words, is that design is no longer about making products. Design is about rethinking humanity. This is frightening. This is frightening, but it's true. We human beings, at this age, at this point of our civilization, are becoming a design product. Not only in terms of aesthetic surgery or in terms of medicine. My body can be engineered. I saw yesterday, shortly, a picture of a supermodel with bionic legs. Fine. This is not science fiction anymore. It's the reality. Everything is in the book. Everything is on YouTube. Technology today brings us everywhere. So I don't waste your time on it because you can access it very easily. But Korea is one of the most technologically advanced societies in the world. Everything, and design is also a problem. So it made sense to do this here. The design has been also the source of inspiration for many artists, Korean and not. I'll go through very quickly some examples of artists that maintain a intense dash problematic dash very interesting relationship with design. Yang Hae-gyu is a wonderful Korean artist that exhibits her work in different museums in the world, and I hope she will exhibit her work soon at the National Museum in Korea. But these are images of her recent exhibition at the Ludwig Museum in Cologne. Cologne used to be the center of the world in Europe, for the art world in Europe. And the Ludwig Museum is a museum with incredible collections and incredible program. I'm not going to comment on her work, but you see, I hope, that her aesthetics deal in a very intense way with the products of industrially made objects and the functions those objects have to play. And again, I say, I remind you, and I'll be very, very happy to listen to the speaker after me, artist Che Zhonghua, because he does a similar thing in a very different type of aesthetics. As I said, she's not by far the only artist that has to do, that in her work deals in different levels of intensity with design, and not only with objects, but also with graphics, very important. And I believe that this problem begins in the early 20th century, especially with constructivism and the Soviet Revolution, when artists are put at the service of making the world better. The experiment of constructivism is one of the very strong examples that art and design talk to each other, love each other, hate each other, fight, and get together. With the work of Yang Hegyu, we will go soon to the work, a few other examples. I'm going to go fast on this. This is MACBA, the museum that I was the director of before I came here. This is in Barcelona. Richard Meyer designed building, a Pritzker Prize. And we have the director of the Pritzker Prize also talking today here. I'm going to be very happy to listen to. And within MACBA, one of the many crazy exhibitions that we did many crazy exhibitions, but one of them was with American artist Rita McBride. Rita McBride's work deals with design. This is a work that was made in 1996 at Witte de Witte, the Center for Contemporary Art in Rotterdam, that I had the honor of being the director of for 6 years. And this work is called Arena, and it is what it means. It is an alternative sitting area that could be mass-produced and that could be also multiplied infinitely. It is made out of wood and Kevlar, which is material used to make boats. It's supposed to be indestructible. So the point is that, and all the work of Rita McBride has to deal with those issues of design reproducibility and uniqueness and mass production. The work had the quality of transforming the museum into a space of theatrical experience. Normally in museums, and this is not a problem of design, this is a problem of us, the professionals that work in the museums. Normally the museums make people be very passive. When you go to a museum, you just look around, you can't touch. Normally people don't talk in museums. These are other images of the work of Rita McBride in the exhibition, but I'm just going to let them flow without describing them. In my opinion, museums in the 20th century and art institutions were about the innovation in display. Artists changed the conditions of display of objects and images, and they invented the white cube. in the 21st century, my opinion is that museums will become the place for people to do things. There is no longer, people can no longer be passive. They need to do things. Even if we Instagram our stuff and our images, we're doing things. We're talking to each other, even if we don't know it. And physical interaction, it's more and more, it becomes something different. You can exist without interacting physically with anyone, nearly. I read an article recently that shops are beginning to investigate the unmanned commerce, meaning that you can go to a shop and nobody talks to you. And you buy things, but you don't interact with anyone. Museums are the contrary. Museums are the place where you need to meet people. They're like nightclubs. I was born and I grew up in the 70s and 80s in the island of Ibiza. So in my teens, I did the nightclub scene. And in my dreams, museums should be like daylight nightclubs. I am exhausting my time, and I'm a very respectful speaker to the next, so I'm going to go fast to the next example, an exhibition that I did before, very early, in the very early 90s. This is the end of my time at the Foundation for Architecture where I began to work. A very early exhibition with architect Bernard Tschumi on his work at the occasion of him winning the competition to design or to refurbish a very interesting building and turning it into an art school in Tourcoing, in the north of France. This was an amusement center created in the 30s, and it was a ruin. And Bernard Tschumi did a fabulous project that turned this derelict place into one of the most sophisticated art schools in the world. And this was the exhibition. It was all hanging from the ceiling. This is also about exhibition design, but it is about how relevant architecture and design goes together with art. In this case, in the form of an exhibition inside a ruin. I have the most terrible memory in the world about the opening of this exhibition because it rained cats and dogs, and the ceiling had holes. So water was pouring inside the exhibition the day of the opening. And I remember a very, very, very bad moment at the time. I am exhausting my time. I hope what I brought into the debates of the Korean Herald Design Tribune was relevant in some way in relationship or in the terms in which design speaks to, fights with, and loves art, and vice versa. In the ways art speaks to, hates, and loves art at the same time. Thank you very much for your attention.